from your Saturday to learn about our Rhode Island environment. Today this is Hera Gallery's Green Stitch, which Hera is sponsored by the Rhode Island Council of the Arts. We had a grant through the Rhode Island Foundation to set up the Green Stitch, which is a crafting and environmental, we were supposed to be outside doing this together, but over Zoom in these times. Yep. But it's sponsored by the Rhode Island Natural History Survey and Save the Bay. And these are monthly meetings weekly meetings, but each month has a different theme. And today we're super lucky to have Mary Gannon and Gabby DeMeillon from DEM's Fish and Wildlife Foundation. So Fish and Wildlife Department. So if, and anyone too, while you're listening to their presentation, there was a craft down at Hera Gallery that you could pick up. And if you want to work on that while you're listening, or afterwards, if we have some time, we'll craft together. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Thank you everyone for that game.
Before you start, hi, this is Vera. Uli, I believe you are going to record it.
I am recording.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
All right, sounds good. So we're going to kick things off just to give everybody kind of a breakdown of how we're going to be doing this today. So me, Mary, will take over for a little bit. We'll talk about some tracks, how to identify tracks, some really cool conservation work that's happening at DEM. And then I'm going to turn it over to Gabby, who's actually out in the field today, outdoors. Normally, this is weird for us to be separated because Gabby and I act as a team, and usually we're together outside. But we wanted to show a PowerPoint with some pictures instead of holding them up to the screen, so you guys could get a really good look at some track photos and some really cool trail camera photos as well. So we're split up today, but we have some really fun stuff in store. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen, and we're going to just watch a quick video. Oh.
And if everybody wouldn't mind muting themselves while the talk is going on, that would be great.
Stop sharing. I'm going to reshare. Sorry. So we're going to do, let's see. Share that. I'm going to go to, so can everybody see the YouTube channel? All righty.
Yep.
So we're going to start off.
The window.
Yeah, so we'll make that nice and big so we should be able to hear everything. So we wanted to share just this quick little video to give you guys just a brief overview of what we do at Fish and Wildlife, because a lot of times people don't even know that Fish and Wildlife exists here in Rhode Island and don't even know what we do. So Gabby and I put together this fun video over the summer, and this is also a part of our Roadie Critter Kits program. So if you are interested in wildlife, if you know a teacher who's interested in wildlife conservation, please tell them about our Roadie Critter Kits program, because we have a really cool curriculum kit program set aside. So we have 3 kits right now on birds, reptiles and amphibians, and bats, with 2 more to come, hopefully by this summer. And these are free for people to access. You can bring them to school. You can use them at the library, however you'd like to use them. So this video is part of the critter kits, and we have a bunch of other fun videos that are part of that too. So we can, if you have questions about that later, we can talk about it, but I'm going to kick us off with a video.
Gabby DeMeillon here with the Division of Fish and Wildlife. I was just walking around the Great Swamp Management Area with Mary, but I seem to have lost her. I don't know where she went. Oh, there she is. Mary, what are you doing over there?
There's so many things to see here, so many cool plants and animals. It's amazing.
You're right, Mary. There's so much awesome wildlife in this management area. At the Division of Fish and Wildlife, we help protect over 60,000 acres of wildlife habitat across Rhode Island.
Well, Gabby, at the Division of Fish and Wildlife, our mission is to protect, restore, and manage wildlife populations and their habitats.
Oh yeah. Our division biologists do a lot of work to study wildlife to see what they need, so they can restore or rebuild and improve the habitat that they require.
When we're looking at populations of wild animals, sometimes we notice that there's too many of a particular animal or too few. This is where management comes in.
Management is all about keeping the balance, and that's one way that hunters help us. We set rules and regulations that allow hunters to take just a few animals from the population, and that actually helps the health of the entire population.
Hunters help out with conservation here in Rhode Island by buying their hunting license every year. The money from those hunting licenses comes straight back to the Division of Fish and Wildlife so that we can use it to support wildlife conservation in the state.
Remember, when hunters and sport shooters buy their firearms, ammunition, and archery equipment, a little piece of that money comes back to us to allow us to do more conservation work in Rhode Island. This is called the Wildlife and Sports Fish Restoration Program, and it's been around since 1937, allowing the entire country to help conserve more wildlife habitat and protect our species. I've lost Mary again. I don't know where she went. She just keeps wandering off. God. Oh, there she is. I swear if she wasn't wearing her fluorescent orange, no one would ever see her. We hope you get out there and enjoy Rhode Island's wildlife and their habitats too.
Turtle! Bird! Oh, there's a snake over here. Oh, I think there's a beaver in this wetland. This is so exciting. Gabby, are you excited?
I'm excited.
Okay, so that's just a little glimpse of when Gabby and I are in the field together, that's what happens. So just to give you a little bit of background, we figured it was more fun to show the video than to go through some PowerPoint slides. So we encourage you to get out there and enjoy our management areas, which Gabby's going to showcase one today. She's out at Big River. And to enjoy our wildlife and the conservation work that we're doing. So we'll talk about some of the projects that our biologists are working on throughout this presentation. So I'm going to share my screen one more time for you guys so you can see some of our cool tracks that we're going to look at. All right, let's get this to work. Here we go. All right. All right, so today we're talking about tracks and trails beneath the snow or below the snow. So this was my husband and my dog making some nice tracks in the snow when we get that nice snowstorm just around Christmas time. So they're making some tracks and trails, but they're not wild tracks. So what do we think Rhode Island's wild critters are doing during the winter time? What are some things that might be happening beneath the snow, out on the snow? What do you guys think? You can unmute yourselves and shout it out. You can toss it in the chat if you like.
Hibernating.
Hibernating. So some might be hibernating. What else?
Finding food and finding some shelter so that they can survive.
Right. So finding food and shelter to survive. Very good. Anything else?
Sleeping.
Sleeping? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, hibernating.
Yeah, hibernating, sleeping, right. So these are good answers. So some animals hibernate, some animals are dormant, so they're sleeping or they're resting. And then some animals, like these deer, are active all winter long. So a lot of the photos that we're going to share throughout this whole PowerPoint, these are trail camera photos from one of our trail camera studies that we did targeting bobcats in the state. But as you can imagine, lots of different things walk by the trail cameras other than bobcats. So we have some really fun photos to share. I love this one. The deer's like, what is going on? What is that clicking sound? So we get some really good shots of animals with the trail camera. Okay, so we have some true hibernators. So these are critters that are totally asleep for the winter, right? You can poke them and they will probably not wake up, like woodchucks, turtles to an extent, box turtles particularly. They'll kind of burrow underneath some leaves or under a log in the forest, and they're totally asleep. Same thing with frogs. They're underneath the water. Some frogs are under the water. So something like a green frog is under the water in a pond. And even though that water may freeze, that kind of insulates them a little bit so they can sleep down there in the pond. Other ones like wood frogs and spring peepers actually overwinter in the leaf litter. So they turn into little frogsicles. As you can imagine, it's probably very cold in the leaf litter right now underneath all that snow. So the frogs actually can freeze and their heart stops beating. And then when it thaws out a little bit, the heart will thaw out and start beating again. And the frog will still be kind of frozen, but it's still alive. So that's kind of, I guess it's true hibernation in a sense. And bats will also truly hibernate. So this picture is taken from, I believe this might be Fort Adams. So we do have a handful of bats that will hibernate in structures throughout the state. And our bat biologists will go down into these creepy hallways in some of the old buildings, in some of these caverns that he finds, and looks for the bats to count them over the winter. But most of our bats will either overwinter in buildings like your attic, or they'll go up north. A lot of our bats end up by going to Vermont. And we found that out through banding data. So a lot of times our bat biologists will actually put a little band or a little bracelet on the bat's wrist. So it's really lightweight and they can still fly around with it, but that band has a number on it that's individual to that bat. So he knows exactly who it is. So we've gotten data from a cave up in Vermont where some of our bats that are here during the summer end up by traveling up there to hibernate, which is pretty cool. Then we have what we call the light sleepers, right? So we always think of bears when we think of hibernating. If you poked a bear while it was hibernating, odds are it'll wake up. So they're kind of in a dormant state. You know, they get nice and fat for the winter, and they go into their dens and they sleep. But you know, the females will have their cubs over the winter. So those cubs are born and they'll nurse them and take care of them, but they're not really emerging out into food sources are much slimmer in the winter. But if you get like a really warm fall and a really warm start to the winter, you can still see bears wandering around before they go dormant. Things like chipmunks, skunks, opossums, you know, they'll kind of find little dens. The chipmunks will have their little burrows where they have a food cache where they've stored all their acorns and stuff for the winter, and they'll wake up and have a snack and then they'll go back to sleep. Anybody know what this critter is up here that's hanging upside down?
Raccoon.
Raccoon, right? This is a raccoon. You can see his his nose. Back here. This is a really crazy picture of a raccoon, but raccoons will also kind of take a snooze and hunker down as best.
Where's the stand, guys? Anybody have it?
And then we've got the critters that are active all winter long, right? So these are all trail camera photos from our bobcat study. So we do have a bobcat here. So this guy's walking over a frozen swamp, which I think is a really cool photo. You know, fisher, weasels, otters, they're all active during the winter. Coyotes, of course, really beautiful photo of a coyote with fresh snow on his back. And then we have, you know, obviously squirrels, right? Everybody's seeing their squirrels in their yard running around,
As soon as you can.
active during the winter.
Right.
Animals have different strategies for survival during the winter. If you're a carnivore, you know, like most of these guys are carnivores, they're able to still find things like squirrels throughout the winter, and squirrels will hide their food and kind of cache it away so that they can survive. So different strategies, all different ways of getting through the winter. So now let's get into some tracks. So I want to ask you guys, do you know which one is which? Cats versus dogs. So which one of these is a cat print? Which one might be a dog print? So we can toss out some answers.
One is cat, second one is dog.
So this one is a cat, this one is a dog. Any other guesses?
Yes.
Left is cat.
Left is a cat. So you guys are right. So this one would be a feline.
Right's cat.
And this one would be the canine. So do you guys know why this one would be a cat and this one is a dog? What gave you those clues?
I heard that. Well, I heard that the dog's dog's paws are like more spread out, and the cats are like they're like kind of in like a slightly.
Yeah. So we've got, you know, our dog toes kind of look like they're a little more spread out. This is more of like an oval shape to the whole paw print. If we look at
I knew that the second one was the dog one because we have one, but we have a print of it right next to us.
Wait, no.
Also,
You say it?
I know that the claws reject on cat's claws, and the dog's claws dig in.
Right, exactly. So the dog, in a dog print, you often see those toenail marks, right? And not all the time. It depends on the way that they put their foot down, how deep the snow is, how much the snow has melted. But for the most part, you'll see those claw marks. On cats, you will not, because their claws are retracted. I also like to think of the cat as kind of like a round. I could draw like a perfect circle around it. The dog, I could kind of draw an oval. The dog's pad, that main pad, has two what we call lobes. So you can see we've got one little lobe here, one little lobe there. The cat has 1, 2, 3. And that's really, I mean, that's tough to see in snow, I find, because the animals have like really furry paw prints too. So the fur kind of muffles things. But if you have a really good track in mud, that's a good clue, whether it's a cat or a dog. Sometimes domestic dogs can look like cat or dog. I have a Labrador, and her paw's a little chubby. So I feel like sometimes her paw prints look like a cat print. Always look for those toenails and those little lobes on the back. All right, good detective work. So a little bit about bobcats. This is a really cool project that we finished up here at Fish and Wildlife. We ran this project for 5 years. So all these awesome trail camera photos were from that 5-year study. But the goal of the study was to catch bobcats in traps. So we've got a bobcat sitting right here in a cage trap. Believe it or not, bobcats are really, really hard to catch. So we didn't catch that many. I think maybe they caught 7 cats over the 5 years, which is not that many considering the amount of time that they did trapping. But bobcats are so cautious. They don't want to go in the trap. They're like, I don't think so. They look at the trap. Other things like possums, they see a free meal and they're like, oh, I'll come right in and have a buffet. And they caught a lot of possums. They caught a lot of raccoons coming in and looking for the bait. So they'd put cat food in the back. They'd put roadkill squirrels and duck wings, and they put feathers, cat toys, CDs, anything to draw the cats in. It was pretty funny. They had some pictures of the cats like playing with the cat toys outside of the trap, but not going in the trap. So finally, when we catch the bobcats, what they would do is they'd put the cat under anesthesia. So this cat is asleep right now. So he's a little groggy, and they're doing some measurements. This is Charlie, our fur bearer and bat biologist. So fur bearers are just mammals that have fur and usually are trapped or hunted for their fur traditionally. So bobcats, we don't hunt or trap here in Rhode Island because we're still learning more about them, right? You don't allow a hunting or a trapping season on a critter that you don't know enough about their population size and how well they're doing. So once they capture the bobcat, they take some samples, they do a blood sample, they'll take a tooth, that little tiny tooth from the front, and you can actually get an age on an animal. Looking at the tooth under a microscope and seeing the growth rings. Like if you looked at a tree and you know the tree rings and you can count the growth rings and see how old that tree is, you can do the same thing with a mammal's tooth. So once the bobcat was measured, etc., they'd give him a GPS collar, which you can see in this picture, and an ear tag, and they'd let him go. And the collar would stay on the bobcat for a year and then automatically drop off. It had a little timer in it. So they wouldn't have to catch the bobcat again. It would just drop off and he was free to go. So this cool map that we have here, all these little purple dots are showing you where this bobcat went. So my little pink star here is where they caught the bobcat, and most of the bobcats were caught in the South Kingstown, Westerly, Charlestown area. So most of our cats came from down South County. And this bobcat went from here all the way over here, and then he traveled up here, came up to the beach a little bit, and then kind of wandered around Point Judith area. So he really, from his capture location, he ended up by kind of relocating and establishing his home range in this green and purple blob area. So this whole study, this is a really cool way that, you can kind of do a hands-off approach once you get that GPS collar, and it gives us a ton of information about where the bobcats are going. So we're still, even though we're not tracking bobcats actively, we're still asking the public, if you see a bobcat, call our office. We'd love to know because we do take observations from citizen scientists to learn more about where bobcats might be in the state. Another cool project that we're working on that uses tracking, maybe not tracking with paw prints, but also with GPS collars, is our collaborative study with the Narragansett Bay Coyote study. So this is Dr. Numi Mitchell holding the coyote. And what she's doing with that coyote, he's also asleep and has been fitted with the GPS collar. And what Numi is studying is a little bit different. So with the bobcats, we want to see where they're going and just kind of understand their spread throughout Rhode Island. We know we got a lot of coyotes, right? So a lot of people see them, a lot of people hear them, a lot of people call our office worried about the coyotes. So really what we're trying to discover with this study is where are coyotes really hanging out and frequenting, and why are they doing it? So Numi has kind of narrowed it down to the coyotes go where there's free food. She's been tracking coyotes in the East Bay for over 10 years in Portsmouth and Newport. They love to dumpster dive. They love trash cans. There's instances of people even feeding coyotes on purpose, which is not good, against the rules. So then they're finding that the coyotes that are being fed or have this like easy food source in a dumpster always flock to that area. So what we're trying to do now is sort of compare, well, okay, we've got those coyotes in the suburbs. Let's track some that are in the Providence area and see what a city coyote does. And then let's track some way out in Western Rhode Island and see what a country coyote does. So basically what her maps end up by looking like are these really cool, so this is on her iPad. She showed me this, you can see all these little clusters of dots all over the map. And this is where one coyote, his name is Ghost. So she names all of her coyotes. They have fun tracking names. So Ghost went all the way around South Kingstown, and he ends up by going to these spots very frequently. So why is he going to those spots? So what Numi does is she'll go out in the field and check it out and look for signs on the ground of what the coyote might be doing. So she uses clues like tracks, like scat or poop, to look and see what the coyote might be doing. She looks for bones. So she finds out that sometimes they're just going to this one spot over and over again because that's where they sleep. There's a den there. Or they might be going back and forth because that's where they meet up with their pack. Or they might be going to a dumpster. So this is a really cool way to kind of pinpoint what coyotes are doing and then figure out how we can change our behavior in that area to help the coyotes to kind of spread out and disperse, so then they don't keep coming back and forth to that one area and start to bother people or pose a hazard for people. So it's all about coexisting with coyotes and making sure we can live peacefully side by side. Do you guys think it's a good idea to feed coyotes? Like throw out a steak for a coyote? No, I'm seeing heads shaking. Like, no. So we don't feed wild animals because they know how to take care of themselves. And it's important for them to know how to take care of themselves and do that. Okay, so I'm gonna run through these next couple of tracks a little quickly because I wanna get to Gabby out in the field because she's got some cool stuff to talk about. But I wanna ask you guys, which one do you think is a rabbit? Which one do you think is a squirrel? Because these are two sets of tracks that get confused a lot.
I'm thinking that those ones are the rabbit tracks.
What do we think these are right here on the left?
Rabbit tracks. They look more like rabbit tracks.
I think these are rabbit tracks. What about these on the right? Whoops.
Squirrel
Oh, no,
track.
I did my answer. So, sorry, guys. I clicked too quickly. So these guys are actually the rabbit track over here. These are the squirrel. So rabbits, I always like to look at the shape, right? So we've got 2 feet here and 1 foot and 1 foot. So when rabbits hop, you can see where he hopped over here. They hop and they land on their back feet, but their front feet are still tucked underneath them. So they swing their little back feet in the front of the front feet, and they end up by making 2 evenly spaced footprints here. And you can see they're kind of long like that back foot, and those 2 little front feet that are round are stuck behind. So then once they land on their back feet, they'll swing their front feet forward and put them here, and then land again and hop, hop, hop as they go. Squirrels make kind of a square. So their front feet, their back feet are here, their little front feet are here, and you can kind of make like a little square around them instead of a long rectangle. So that's my 2 ways of remembering squirrel versus rabbit. These are pretty common. So if you go out in the woods today, I bet you'll see both of these, and you can test yourself. Anybody want to guess why? Oh no, I'm stealing my own question. So we also can look for deer and rabbit signs as well, other than tracks, right? You can look at browse. So I challenge you guys, when you go out in the woods the next time, look at the ends of some twigs and see if you can tell the difference between deer and a rabbit. So deer, I have a deer skull here. You can see they've got these teeth on the bottom, no teeth on the top. That means they rip the branch. And they kind of pin it on the roof of their mouth and they rip it with their bottom teeth. Rabbits have little teeth like a pair of scissors or clippers. So they've got teeth on the top, teeth on the bottom, and they make a nice clean cut across the branch. So another cool way to test your knowledge when you go out in the woods. And then who do we think, whose scat is whose? Which one is rabbit, which one is deer? So my left-hand side.
Deer. Rabbit. That's rabbit.
Rabbit?
Left
right
is
hand
rabbit.
side?
And that one's deer.
Deer. All right, you guys are good at this. So we got a rabbit and a deer. So rabbits, you may not look at M&Ms ever again the same way ever again, but rabbits look like M&Ms. Deer look like peanut M&Ms. so regular M&Ms, peanut M&Ms. And usually rabbits, they'll poop in a little pile like this, but you'll kind of see pellets spread out, like one here, one here, one here. The deer will usually poop all in one pile. And you can find those out in the woods. You can tell the difference, like how fresh they are. If they're really dark, that means the deer was there pretty recently. If they're kind of dry and flaking apart, those are probably older scat. This is a good way to track animals and to figure out the presence or the absence of those animals, because mammals are really, really secretive. So sometimes all you got to work with is poop. And then I wanted to toss in a couple of other signs, some of my favorite things, and I won't reveal these tracks just yet because Gabby is going to talk about this critter down by the water. But you might see some chewing like this, so rabbits will chew a little bit on the bark. Anybody want to take a guess as to what this is?
I think it's a woodpecker.
Woodpecker, right? So this is a woodpecker hole from the pileated woodpecker. So this is our
Yeah,
largest
it was
woodpecker.
right. It was a pileated woodpecker.
Yeah. So this is a big, big woodpecker. He's about the size of a crow. So they make a perfect rectangle hole in the tree, and that's where they lay their eggs and they raise their chicks. So another, not a mammal, but still a cool sign to look for in the woods and see where there's an old nesting cavity. And of course, some more tracks. So we'll take a look at, if you're lucky, you can see some stuff in the mud, like a raccoon track, or if you look really closely, these little tiny, tiny tracks, these are mouse tracks. You can see the little tail line right here. Anybody want to guess what this is?
Bird?
A bird? Yeah, a very, very big bird. What's one of our biggest birds in the state?
Hawk?
Hawk?
Herring?
So herring?
Owl. Great horned owl.
So think of something you see walking around a lot in the spring. Maybe kind
Eagle? Eagle. Eagle. Goose, yeah, goose.
a goose.
Eagle.
A turkey?
It's a turkey. I heard it. Yeah. So these are turkey tracks, right? So these nice 3 toes on the turkey. Always scratching around. You can see where they kind of scratch around. They're looking for something to eat. Cool. All right. So I'm going to turn it over to Gabby. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I think if everybody makes Gabby, if you change to speaker view, then we should be able to see Gabby on the big screen. And she's going to talk about a beaver dam at Big River and talk about some signs outdoors. Take it away, Gabby.
All right, hello everybody. So I am at Big River Management Area. So this is one of our management areas that we have in the state, and we have them all across the state. This is probably my favorite one because I kind of grew up coming around here. But the other reason why I love Big River is because you can come see this giant beaver dam that's right behind me. So you can see it spans all the way across. There's actually a trail that goes from one side all the way to the other. And then behind me, in the background, you can see the beaver's lodge. So when you're looking for signs of beavers, usually there are some really big, obvious signs. So like our big dam that we have here and the big lodge that's behind me. So the lodge is the beaver's home. So that's the place where they live. And it's built out of lots of sticks and mud. And what the beavers do is they actually gnaw on trees, on little twigs, and they break them up into small pieces. So I've got this little gnawed on branch right here. And see how it's at that kind of sharp angle? That's because the beaver actually gnawed away. So this is another sign you can look for, is this beaver chew. This one's pretty old because if it was new, it would be like kind of like a lighter color. It's kind of grayed out now because it's been sitting for a long time. So this is another sign that you can look for. So pretty much if you see trees standing in water like we have here, that's probably from a beaver because the beaver built this big dam across the way, blocked the flow of the water, and flooded the area, which is perfect for beaver habitats. So they build their own habitats, which is awesome. So beavers are mammals. So they're semi-aquatic mammals because they spend part of their lives like in the water and part on land. And so we have 3 different species of semi-aquatic mammals in Rhode Island. We have beavers, we have otters, and we have muskrats. So beavers are rodents. So like a mouse, it's a giant rodent. They're North America's largest rodents. And so are muskrats. So muskrats are like mini beavers. They're like teeny tiny. And their tail, instead of being flattened like horizontally this way, it's flattened laterally this way. And so they're like mini beavers. And they actually build mini lodges as well. So muskrats have these tiny little like baby lodges. So if you see a beaver dam or a beaver lodge, you can look around and see if you can also find like a mini lodge, and that could be a muskrat. But muskrats can also live inside of a beaver's lodge. Sometimes they'll share that home. So talking about tracks. So Mary showed you a track earlier that was pretty big. I believe this is the one she showed you. Now I'm trying to remember. And it had kind of webbing between the toes. Can anyone think of what that could be from? Like a big foot with webbing between the toes.
A duck.
I heard a duck. I heard an otter.
Platypus?
Platypus. That's a good guess. So you're right. So those.
Do platypus even live around here?
No, they don't. Very good. So they don't live around here, but you're very good in guessing that they would have webbing between their toes.
Beaver.
Beaver. You got it. So that footprint that Mary showed you was a beaver. So beavers have really big feet. So if you ever see a really big track, it can be like bigger than your hand, and it's got those webbing on the toes, then that would be from a beaver. Otters also have webbing on their hind legs, and you can see the webbing on their feet, but they would be smaller. And otters, they have kind of like shorter toes, and their front paw has like the C shape below the little short toe pads. And otter tracks look a lot different than beaver tracks because I said beavers are rodents. Well, otters are actually mustelids. So they're in a whole nother family. They're in the same family as minks and fishers. So totally different. The other thing that you can look for when you're trying to find signs of animals when you're out in the woods, everything eats and everything poops, right? So you can look for scat. And the difference between beaver scat and otter scat is that beavers, because they're rodents, they are herbivores. What's an herbivore?
Something like
Animal that eats like plants and veggies.
Awesome, exactly.
plants and fruit.
Yeah, that just eats plants. So beavers, they'll eat aquatic vegetation, so some plants that grow in the water, and they'll also eat the inner layer of bark. So they can actually just eat trees and eat sticks. That's what they survive on. So if you were to find beaver scat, it would be full of like little wood chips, but it usually disintegrates pretty quickly. So it's really hard to find beaver scat. But otters, they are carnivores. So they eat meat because they're mustelids. They're in a whole different family. And so if you were to find beaver scat, you'd probably be close to the water and you'd find little fish scales in it. And I've actually found beaver scat right here in Big River before. So I know there are beavers that visit here also. And so if you look out here, the water's all frozen. How do you think a beaver gets its food if it's living inside its lodge and the only entrances to the lodge are underneath the water? How do you think it would find its food?
I mean, there's no fish underneath there. They couldn't survive.
It couldn't survive?
How would a beaver even survive underneath there?
Yeah, how would a beaver survive if they can only come out the bottom, which is underneath the bottom,
They have a refrigerator underwater almost.
They have
sticks underwater.
They have sticks underwater. Awesome. Exactly. Sticks underwater. Awesome. So behind me, by that lodge, out in front of it, there are tiny little sticks sticking up out of the water, and that's called the beaver's cache. So that's where the beaver, he collects lots and lots of little sticks. He sticks them halfway in the water, halfway out of the water, right near his lodge, and he can go out of the water or out of his lodge underneath the water, come up and still be able to eat those sticks that he's stored away if the water is totally frozen over. That was a great guess. So the last thing I want to talk about, if I have time, do I have time?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, the last thing I wanted to talk about is what's going on underneath the ice. So Mary mentioned what some frogs will do is they'll freeze solid, right? Where do you think all of the turtles are? Where are all the turtles right now?
They're under the ground. They dig
Underneath the leaves.
underneath the ground or underneath the leaves. So some turtles will go underneath the ground or underneath the leaves, like box turtles. So box turtles, they'll just dig a little bit underneath the ground. But what's super cool about box turtles, which is different than any other turtle, is they can actually freeze just like those frogs. So they can freeze about 50% of their body and they can still survive. They can thaw out. So if they can freeze for up to like 50 hours, I think it is. And then they can thaw out and still be completely fine, which is pretty neat. They're the largest animal that can do that. Other species of turtles, like our freshwater aquatic turtles, they'll kind of go underneath the mud at the bottom, and they have these special pores around their cloaca, which is basically their bum, and they can breathe through their bum, through those pores around their bum, because their body slows down so much and their metabolism slows down, so they're not moving a lot and they can't move a lot. They don't need a lot of energy and they don't need a lot of oxygen. And so they actually can absorb enough oxygen right from the water through those special pores to be able to survive through the winter. And sometimes, like when the ice freezes over, a lot of other animals that are in that water will use up the oxygen that's stored there in the wintertime. So the oxygen level can get really, really low. But turtles like painted turtles and snapping turtles, they can switch the way that they breathe to anaerobic respiration, which is like the way that we process things when we're running or exercising. And it causes lactic acid to build up. So it causes acid to build up in them. And a lot of turtles can't tolerate that, but painted turtles and snapping turtles are really, really good at tolerating that. And painted turtles actually will take the calcium out of their shells and they'll use it to combat that lactic acid buildup so that their muscles won't all freeze up, so they can survive even longer underneath the water with very, very little oxygen. And then in the summertime, they come out and they bask and they can start to warm up and move around and get rid of all that lactic acid that built up. So pretty neat. Reptiles are my favorite, but lots and lots of cool stuff if you just go out to a wetland and look around, and if you know the way to find these signs. So now you guys have some clues as to how to find beaver sign, otter sign, and muskrat sign. And we actually have biologists that are we're partnering with at the University of Rhode Island that are going out in kayaks and looking for signs, just like I pointed out, looking for scat, looking for tracks of these semi-aquatic mammals to figure out kind of what they're doing, where they're going, and what kind of habitats they like. So pretty neat. So you guys can help out with that too by going out and looking and telling us what you guys find. So I think that's about it for me from here. It's starting to get a little chilly. I'll hand it back over to Mary and the rest of them over there.
Thanks, Gabby. You're like so brave. She's like all bundled up. Gabby, just before you like bundle up again, where can you tell everybody where that is in Big River in case they'd like to go view that overlook?
Sure. So this is right by Tarbox Pond. So it's off of Hopkins Hollow Road. So if you park, there's like a little section where you can see the water right by the road. And if you park there, there's a little trail that you can walk in, and you just kind of follow the trail as straight as you can go, and you'll find the dam. It's pretty big, so you'd see it if you walked down the main trail, and then you have to kind of hook right. You can actually see it if you pull up satellite view and you look at Tarbox Pond and you look down, you can find the dam because it's so large from the aerial view.
Nice. Thanks, Gabby. Mm-hmm. Go warm up in the car. Run down the trail. So yeah, so we have, I'm just going to share my screen one more time so that everybody can have a chance to, so we have our contact info. We have plenty of time for questions. So I wanted to give everybody the opportunity to let you guys know that we have a Facebook page, we have an Instagram account, we have our wildlife outreach page. So if you are interested in attending any of our programs, so we do, right now we're doing virtual programs, but we're hoping to get back into the swing of things, maybe this summer, hopefully, fingers crossed. But we do outdoor family-friendly programs where we look at bats, we look at vernal pools, we've looked at birds, we've gone bird watching before. So we do a lot of different things throughout the year that are outdoors and together. So we hope that we're going to be getting away from this digital stuff and getting back into the field. And of course, if you have any other additional questions, you can always email me or Gabby. We're happy to connect with you all. So I'm going to open it up for questions, for comments, any questions about the stuff that we talked about, our conservation projects, visiting state land. What's on your mind? So I'm looking, oh, I see the chat. We have a question. Oh. Nobody has questions?
I have a question, actually.
Yeah.
You said we shouldn't feed any animals, wild animals. But people are okay feeding birds, right?
Yeah. So bird feeders are kind of the exception. But there's still, there's still proper ways to feed birds. So what are some things that we think are appropriate for birds to eat?
Birdseed.
Birdseed, right? Anything else?
We give them suet.
Suet, right? Yep. So the suet cakes, fruit as well. So you could put out like orange slices and things like that. So seeds, fruit, and suet, I would say, are pretty much the only things you should be giving birds. And even then, bird feeders should be cleaned regularly with like a bleach and water solution, really scrub them out because birds can spread, just like thinking, if you drank off your water bottle and then you handed it to your friend and they handed it to their friend, odds are somebody's going to get sick along the line, right? So if we're sharing the bird feeder all the time, birds can actually pass disease to each other that way. So it's very important to clean out our bird feeders, especially if the seed gets wet. Mold is a problem a lot of times with bird feeders and can be toxic to birds. Things that we should not be feeding birds are like bread, crackers, food scraps, things like that. Because bread and crackers and that sort of stuff is actually really bad for birds. It can get stuck in their stomach. They can choke on it. It's actually not nutritionally good for them. So I always think like, oh my gosh, I love potato chips. I could eat potato chips all day, every day, right? I probably wouldn't be that healthy though if I just ate potato chips. So it's the same thing with birds and bread. They'll eat it because it tastes good to them. But it's not very good for them. So keeping to that, seeds, suet, and fruit is great. But I recommend for folks to put up your bird feeder like late November and then take it down by March. Because now we have bears in the state, and we've had a lot of people so far tell us that they've had a bear come in and knock down their bird feeder and eat the seeds and eat the suet. That all of those fatty, oily foods they really, really love, bears. So that's something that the birds can take care of themselves in the spring, in the summer, early fall. One of the best things we can do for wildlife, if you want to feed wildlife, is to create habitat for them. So planting native shrubs that produce fruits, planting native wildflowers for our bees and our butterflies and moths and hummingbirds. Really creating the habitat and creating a welcoming place for them is the best way that we can help wildlife. I know a lot of people feed animals because they feel bad, or like I have family members who feed deer. It's like, it's not good for the deer to feed them corn. It's actually really bad for their stomachs in the winter. It can mess with their metabolism. So it seems like it's not nice to not feed the animals, like, but isn't it helpful to them? It's actually better for us to kind of take a hands-off approach. Great question. Oh, sorry, that was a long answer, but we talk a lot about this because a lot of people feed animals. So yeah. Any other questions?
Feed squirrels?
Say that one more time.
Can you feed squirrels or not?
Yeah, squirrel, I would say, I feel like if you put up a bird feeder, you're probably putting up a squirrel feeder too, because the squirrels will eat those seeds too. So I usually don't feed the squirrels because they'll figure out a way to break into your bird feeder. But peanuts are actually not great for squirrels. I know a lot of people like to feed them peanuts, but squirrels eat real nuts from trees, like acorns and beech nuts and hickory nuts and things like that. Peanuts are legumes, so they're like peas and beans. They're different nutrition wise, so it can actually mess with squirrels when we feed them peanuts. But that's not to say that, I'm sure there's plenty of squirrels in the city. I've seen them eat bagels and all sorts of weird stuff out of trash cans, so they do survive, but it's best to not tempt them. Any other questions, maybe about some of our conservation?
I just thought of one more thing I didn't mention. If you do want to come to Big River Management Area, make sure you wear your because we still are in the hunting season. So you just have to wear either a hat or a vest right now. But I just wanted to give you guys that heads up if you do want to come out here. It's beautiful, just a little bit chilly.
Yeah, that's important. You know, because we talked about in our video how hunters contribute to conservation and how we work with hunters a lot. So when we visit the management areas, it's good to remember that those are the places that the hunters can go to hunt unless they hunt on private land. So it's always important to be safe. And I've talked to a lot of hunters and they're like, the people are not wearing the orange, you know, so it's you know, it makes them nervous when they see people out there who are not aware of the safety rules. So you can always get a beanie, you can get the vests, I think, at like Job Lot and Walmart and stuff. But it's always good to just keep them in your car. When in doubt, wear it. even if you're on a spot that you don't know if hunting is allowed, just put it on. So that goes until the end of February. We'll end our small game season, then we have a break in March, and then April and May start spring turkey. So a lot of people think, oh, fall and winter is hunting season, but April and May, you have to wear your orange too. Any other questions?
There's a question in the chat that is, are any endangered animals in Rhode Island?
Yeah, so we have state threatened and endangered species, and we also have a federally threatened and endangered species, the American burying beetle, that's only found on Block Island and in Oklahoma. That's the only places you could find it in the country. So we've got a really strong conservation program in collaboration with Nature Conservancy out on Block Island to conserve the American burying beetle, which is a carrion beetle. It's black and orange and it eats dead stuff. So it's actually really cool. It's like the ultimate Halloween creature. It's even black and orange, so we're working on conserving that species, but we have plenty of state threatened and endangered species that we're working to conserve. And you can see the whole list of those species in our Rhode Island Wildlife Action Plan, which I can put the link in the chat while I'm thinking of it. I'm going to just type it in and I can put the link in the chat so you can see. But there's over 400 different species that are listed as species of greatest conservation need here in Rhode Island. And that means that they just need a little bit of more special attention. So it could be something that's not necessarily particularly rare, but if we don't take action now, that animal could become endangered in the future. Or it could be something that we're seeing, we're starting to see the warning signs of, like habitat fragmentation might negatively affect a species in the future. And here in Rhode Island, we have a lot of fragmentation. Our habitat is cut up into little tiny chunks. There's lots of roads. There's, housing developments. It's not a continuous habitat anymore. It's kind of like a quilt. When you look at it from above, if you look on Google Earth, which is one of my favorite things to do, it's just like scroll around on Google Earth. So thinking about, okay, so our action might be to just conserve as much land as we can. So that's why we have management areas where that's conserved forever. Where Gabby's standing right now is never going to turn into anything else other than a management area and habitat for our wildlife. And there's definitely some animals that really, really benefit from that. Things like our box turtles, spotted salamanders. A lot of our reptiles and amphibians are on that list because they're heavily impacted by pollution, by fragmentation, by overcollection. So our turtles, some of our turtle species are in trouble because people actually poach them, not poaching like we think of elephants in Africa where they kill the elephant for the tusks, but they poach the turtles for the pet trade. People scoop them up, put them in backpacks, and they sell them. So that's a huge issue for some of our wildlife. Definitely check out that list and you'll be surprised at some of the species that are on there. We've got some butterflies and moths that only eat one particular plant. They have a host plant, so thinking about how we can conserve the habitats where those plants occur, so that gives those little critters a refuge, and they have the things that they need to survive. Some of our animals are not doing so great because of lack of certain types of habitats, like young forest is a habitat that we're particularly focused on. So where Gabby is standing is a mature forest that's got big trees that are old. They've been there for 70 to 100 years untouched. But some animals don't do great in that type of a forest. They really need young forest that's like 10 to 15 years old. So we actually do cuts in our management areas, little small sections where we'll cut down a bunch of the trees and let it grow back naturally and let nature reset itself. So we have over 40 species of songbirds that use young forest, as well as some really cool birds like the American woodcock, AKA the timberdoodle. Google the timberdoodle if you want to giggle, and they're just such cool birds. They sing in the spring and they do a whole little dance in the sky. It's awesome. The New England cottontail is our native cottontail rabbit that uses young forest. So if you see bunnies in your yard or out at the soccer field or the park or wherever you might see them, that's actually a non-native species of rabbit, the eastern cottontail that was brought here from the prairie as hunting stock way back in the day. And because we started clearing lots of land in Rhode Island, people had farms, there's a lot of open space, ball fields, parks, etc., lawns. The eastern cottontail did really well. And all that young forest habitat started to shrink. And so did our population of New England cottontails that likes that shrubby, dense, briery habitat. So we're working to create that habitat and also to breed the rabbits at Roger Williams Zoo, so we can raise them and hopefully establish wild populations as well. So that was a lot. I get carried away because there's a lot of information. We could go on for days and days. But yeah, that's a great question. You never realize what's like, we think of endangered species being like far away. There's stuff that needs help right in our own backyard.
Bridget, you had a question?
I was wondering about if beaver dams ever become sort of problematic, like if they become too big or they're blocking, too much water from flowing, and if they ever are taken apart by DEM.
Yeah, so it depends. So they can block roads, they can flood roads, or if the beaver dam breaks, that's also a problem too. Gabby, feel free to jump in on this one too, seeing as you're standing near the beaver dam.
Yeah, I was just going to say, talking about breaking up beaver dams. So we have some water control structures set out around the state to help so we can either raise or lower the amount of water in an area to kind of create that wetland habitat. But beavers do not like them, and they like to try to stop the water from flowing in and out. So they'll build up all around our areas, and we have to go there with like a rake and start pulling the sticks out. And you can pull it out one day, and the next morning, the beaver will have completely rebuilt that entire dam. They're pretty impressive. They're really, really quick at building. They're really efficient. So we definitely have issues with that. And I think, Mary, have you ever had to go out and remove them? It's a lot of work, and then they just build it right back up again.
I was a habitat tech before getting this job. I was a seasonal for our habitat biologist. So every so often she'd be like, can you just go take care of the water control structure in the swamp? And I'd be standing there with hip waders on and like the rake, and you're like sweating and the mud is flying. You're like, oh, they're just going to fill it up tomorrow. They put like big rocks in there and like mud and like plants and like everything you could possibly think of. But to combat that, though, they ended up by redoing the water control structures at a couple of our impoundments. So they're man-made wetlands on some of the management areas that they created for ducks. So to create hunting opportunity for duck hunters, but also to just kind of create wetlands, and lots of things use wetlands. So it's not just for the ducks, but like in the fall, we have shorebirds that migrate, and they'll use the mud flats that we expose in the impoundment, and they'll use those to feed on. Nobody's hunting the shorebirds. It's just a kind of a side benefit and goal for the impoundments. But they put a new control structures that are actually underneath the water. So there's like a tube that goes under the water. It has like a little cone on it, so the beavers can't get in. And it's silent. Technically, it's beaver proof, because what like gets them excited to fill up and dam an area is hearing running water. So our existing control structure was this big pipe that was exposed, and it had like a cage around it, and it was like a babbling brook, like 24/7. So they're like, we gotta like, it sprung a leak. Like, come on, Bobby, I thought you fixed it yesterday. So I can only imagine them like trying to fix it up. But this one is silent because it's under the water, so they don't feel the need to fill it up. And that seems to have worked.
Yes, the beaver deceiver. That's what it's called.
Yeah. It's a feat of engineering. It's amazing. We had engineers come out and figure out how to do it, because the pipe goes underneath a road. If you've ever been to the Great Swamp Management Area in West Kingston, there's a big road that walks around the impoundment, like a dirt road that you can walk on, you can ride your bike, people take horses and stuff, but they, and it's wide enough to drive for our trucks. So they had to bring like equipment out and like get it to go underneath the road and filter out into the wetland that's on the other side of the road. So nowadays we're really not like blocking up wetlands and managing and creating these impoundments. That was kind of a thing in the 50s and 60s. So now we're just maintaining them at this point. I don't think we'll be making any new ones because we're really focusing on like forest and coastal restoration as well, and thinking about climate change and sea level rise, because our coast is really, really developed. So there's very few places on the coast that are natural habitats. So we have a couple of management areas that include salt marshes, but we're always on the lookout to see if we can conserve more coastal habitat too.
Super. Thank you so much. Can you let me know, do you guys have any upcoming things that some of our young kids could join again? Do you guys have any more Zooms coming up that you want to share with us?
Yeah, definitely. So we've got, I'm going to type in the chat right now, dem.ri.gov/wildlife outreach. If you go to this page, you can see our little online calendar. We've got a bunch of cool stuff coming up, including a winter habitat tour.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Say that one more time.
So we're going to be doing a winter habitat tour at one of our management areas, which I will be on. I will be outdoors. So Gabby and I are going to head out to Black Farm Management Area in Ashaway to showcase some really cool habitat close to the Wood River. We'll be talking about deer coming up. We're going to be talking about vernal pools in March, or amphibians in early March. Gabby, what else am I missing?
Not for kids, but for adults, if you're interested and you want to learn more about, we're calling them nocturnal nuisances, but foxes, coyotes, and fishers. We have a program coming up next Wednesday, all about them, their life history, some of the projects that we have going on with them, and how to reduce conflicts between humans and wildlife. So that's more of an adult program, but that one's should be really interesting and really fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And if we could do like just a round of applause, that was so informational and educational. It was great to learn all about our local environment. Thank you so much for the presentation and for being outside in these frigid temperatures.
It's not so bad.
It's not so bad when you bundle up.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming, guys.
My mom and dad are still cold from being outside from like an hour ago.
Yeah, it's freezing. Feels like the coldest it's been all year.
I know. It actually feels like winter now. It's like, oh, we're so spoiled.
Yesterday it was like 9 degrees.
Oh. Well, also too, guys, for all the kids here, we're supposed to have some snow on Monday. So this will be a great opportunity to use all the information that you learned about to kind of track stuff and really play outside, give your parents a break and be outside tracking those animals.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you so much, guys. We really appreciate it. If anybody wants to stick around for any crafting for maybe about 15 minutes or so, and we're also going to introduce, get a little bit of info from Reed, our next, our March speaker. So thank you, everybody, for coming.